Okay, good morning, everybody. First, I want to say a brief word about the horrific accident at DCA. I've been briefed on it, and I'm continuing to monitor the situation. Our hearts go out to everyone who was impacted by this horrific incident at DCA. We're praying for the victims, the families, and our brave responders, first responders, as we monitor the situation. But I have to tell you, I just watched President Trump's news conference. Listen, it's one thing for internet pundits to spew off conspiracy theories. It's another for the President of the United States to throw out idle speculation as bodies are still being recovered and families still being notified. It just turns your stomach. Now to the issue at hand. Well, this week, the American people saw firsthand just how destructive the impact of Project 2025 could be. In the blink of an eye, Donald Trump ordered OMB to illegally freeze trillions of dollars in federal funding for families, kids, hospitals, fire stations, police officers. It affects every single community in my state and in every one of our states. Thankfully, Senate Democrats and the American people fought back and made our voices heard, and Trump was forced to retreat, rescinding his disastrous memo. But make no mistake about it, as long as Russell Vought is Donald Trump's pick for OMB director, Americans can be virtually certain he will try again to illegally seize funding for their communities. Given the unlawful behavior of OMB this week, Senate Democrats will not move an inch to advance Mr. Vought's nomination any further. If Mr. Vought, chief architect of Project 2025, intends to continue to break the law at OMB and cause harm to our communities, he should return to the committee and explain himself, how this policy happened, and exactly what the path forward will be. The hearing that the committee held was before the funding freeze was issued. And the future of our hospitals and our schools and our food banks and our law enforcement should not be in the hands of an ideologue who substitutes the rule of law with his own ultra-right ideology. That's the risk of elevating someone like Russell Vought. Vought was evasive in his hearing when asked about the funding freeze, but his actual plan was put on full display this week. What he told the committee and what he did were opposites. And that's why what he did was so gross, so devastating, so dumb. Mr. Vought needs to return to the committee to give the American people some honest answers, or at least some comprehension as to what the hell happened this week and what the plan is moving forward. So, I fully support the committee's decision not to participate in this sham process. I salute Senator Merkley for his leadership and strength on this issue, and all the members of the committee for agreeing. The real solution, of course, is for President Trump to just drop Vought's nomination altogether. If confirmed, he's going to become baggage, certainly for the American people, but also for the administration, as this week's incident has made so clear. What happened this week should be a lesson to President Trump that following Russell Vought and Project 2025 is a loser for America, but also a loser for Donald Trump. He had to backtrack with his tail between his legs. Mr. Vought will be the architect of more losing for President Trump. So, in conclusion, though the Trump administration failed in this tactic, it's no secret that they will try to find another. And when they do, I promise you that our Budget Committee, led by Ranking Member Merkley, and that Senate Democrats will be there to call it out, fight back, and defend American families. Senator Merkley, and I thank the members of the committee for inviting me to come today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader, and we all together are holding the families affected by the tragedy at Reagan National Airport in our hearts. But we stand here now to convey a very important message to America, that Mr. Russell Vought is dangerously unfit to serve as director of OMB. He is a threat to our democracy. He is the brains behind the dead of night directive that destroyed all these programs for families across America. We on the committee asked for a 2-week extension to explore these issues. We directed specific questions to Mr. Vought, and he has chosen not to answer those questions. With the committee deciding, the majority deciding to hold the vote now, at this moment, as private room off the floor of the Senate chamber, we're here to say that is not okay. This nomination is so troubling that certainly the discussion between the public, between the members of the committee, should be held in public. And we should benefit from each other's concerns and perspectives before a vote is held. But both of our requests, an extension and a public debate and discussion before the vote, were rejected, and thus we stand here rather than participating in the sham process in secret off the floor of the Senate chamber. Mr. Vought has done so many things that make him dangerously unfit. He illegally held up military aid for Ukraine, contributing to President Trump's first impeachment. He coordinated an order at the end of the last Trump administration to strip civil service protections from tens of thousands of nonpartisan, dedicated, capable American government employees. He was thwarted only by the failure of President Trump to win re-election. He supports prosecuting the officials who investigated President Trump. He advocates for that very same discredited impoundment strategy he used on Ukraine. He wants to transfer the power of the purse as constitutionally given to Congress to the president, so the president can decide how much goes to each program. This is both breaking the law and the Constitution. He promotes using the military to quell domestic unrest. He calls for drugs used in medical abortions to be banned, and for abortion itself to be banned without exception for rape or incest or the life of the mother. His vision of an all-powerful president is completely at odds with the Constitution's separation of powers. It's completely at odds with the Constitution's checks and balances. So we stand here to say that not only are his policies a threat to the programs that serve families all across America, but in fact, he is a dangerous threat to our constitutional system of representative democracy. This is why we stand unified and opposed to his nomination. Senator Murray.
Well, thank you, Senator Merkley. Thank you so much for bringing us together today and for all you have done in leading the charge and laying out why no member of this body should vote to confirm Russ Vought as OMB director. Over the last few days, American people have seen what putting Vought's radical plans into action look like. Mass chaos, mass confusion, and a whole lot of hurt for the American people. Because Russ Vought is the mastermind of Donald Trump's devastating funding freeze. For years, he's been the #1 cheerleader of the idea that Trump should just ignore Congress, ignore our laws, and unilaterally block funding that the American people count on. He took this idea for a spin last time he was Trump's OMB director, helping Trump illegally hold up security assistance. He's written a lot about it in the years since. And when he came before all of us last week, he refused time after time to simply commit to following the law and getting fund out to the communities that all of us represent. And now we've all seen what Vought's grand scheme to lock away funding communities need looks like in practice. You know what makes absolutely no sense? Confirming the mastermind of the last few days of chaos to oversee our country's budget again. Someone who, in addition to having spent a lot of time thinking about how Trump can steal funding from working families to help billionaires, he was chief author of Project 2025. He has called for the complete, quote, abolition of abortion. He told all of us here just like last week that he believes the 2020 election was rigged. He said we live in a, quote, post-constitutional time, and he wants to help Trump run dedicated civil servants out of their jobs so they can install loyalists who will do his bidding. No way. And as I said earlier this week, while Trump continues to hold up funding people are counting on, today's committee vote should not have ever continued as scheduled, and it certainly should not be held behind closed doors where it is being held right now, without any opportunity for senators to talk about his nomination and for the American people to see and hear that discussion. So we're here together instead, and we're calling on the full Senate to reject Russ Vought's nomination.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Well, welcome to the Trump carnival of dysfunction, chaos, lying, and secret influence. Usually, a government shutdown is occasioned by an impasse between the parties here in Congress. This was a unilateral government shutdown done by Trump at the behest of Project 25. Its implementer was Russ Vought before he even is confirmed. What is he doing running OMB before he's confirmed, and who is he really working for? Well, there's a signal, because word is out that the implementer of this was his sidekick and junior associate, a guy named Mark Paoletta. Where do we know Mark Paoletta from? We know him from the billionaire scheme to capture the Supreme Court. We know him because he's the other guy in the Harlan Crow painting with Harlan Crow, the court fixer Leonard Leo, and Clarence Thomas. That's who's in there implementing this stuff. They're implementing Project 2025. They're doing it at the behest of the same creepy right-wing billionaires who are behind the court capture scheme, and it is crashing out into agencies and institutions in our states who are suddenly confused by a unilateral Trump government shutdown. What the heck is the Medicaid portal doing closed in Rhode Island? My constituents ask. What the heck is doing with the firefighters and police grants like AFG that they have been counting on? What does this mean for Head Start? Can we pay our people? Can they go back to work? Sojourner House, a domestic violence shelter, wanted to know whether it could take in women who are coming to seek their services. Our community health centers were wondering about taking appointments from people who had scheduled appointments. And an issue really important to many of us is dealing with addiction prevention and recovery. And again, those institutions didn't know what to do, and everybody was put into a scramble and a panic. We have got to put an end to this. Russ Vought is unfit for this job. His little sidekick, Mark Paoletta, is unfit for this job. And this Trump billionaire disruption connection is one that is going to cause the American people real harm. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tim Kaine.
Well, thank you all. My mind's sort of somewhere else today, but I'll just say two things. In the hearing that we had with Russ Vought, one of the things I questioned him about was a statement that he made, such an unusual statement, that he wanted to put the federal workforce into trauma. Those were his words. Not reduce spending or deal with the deficit. I want to put them into trauma so that they won't want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. That's a very close paraphrase of what he said. And we wondered, and I asked him, do you want air traffic controllers to, be in trauma and not want to go to work? And he said, oh, of course not, Senator. But it wasn't just an expression of gleeful cruelty toward the federal employees. Now this bogus buyout thing has been put on the table, because if you take steps that make them all worried about their work and that they're going to get fired, and then you offer them some apple like you might get on Halloween that's probably got some razor blades in it, maybe they'll take it. But we just did a bill to try to bulk up the nation's air traffic controllers because we've been short of air traffic controllers, and now a Russ Vought strategy is to traumatize the federal workforce. That lands particularly hard with me this morning. Second thing, just one example, and all of us have been, dealing with our own agencies, but I found this particularly kind of cruel. Head Start programs. Many of our Head Start programs were in Washington yesterday. They're here as part of an annual visit where they would come talk to us about the budget or whatever. My Head Start programs came in and talked to me. When the order came out, these are programs that receive federal funding. When the order came out, the order was so poorly written that they didn't know exactly what it meant. And so they did what they would naturally do. They called their federal program officer to ask questions, phone calls not answered. They sent them emails not responded to. We've been aware that there's sort of an external gag order that has been imposed on these agencies by the Trump administration. You are not allowed to talk to the press. You are not allowed to talk to external stakeholders. I wasn't aware until I met with my Head Start folks yesterday that there's an internal gag order too, that they are not, many of these federal agencies that manage these programs are not even allowed to deal directly with those implementing services to family and kids and answer their questions. I have a program in Virginia that is on a 5-year contract that ends tomorrow. The 5-year contract ends tomorrow. Dozens and dozens of kids in a rural part of Virginia, they can't get an answer about an extension application that they have had pending for months. They can't get an answer. This is Rust vote government. This is what we all saw on display in the hearing, and there's a reason why the Budget Committee is not in our Budget Committee hearing room having a markup on this nomination. And the reason is it's already out of the gate so abysmally unprofessional and abysmally cruel that they don't want to have an open discussion where committee members can state their piece and try to persuade their colleagues. What a glaring abdication of responsibility for a body that considers itself a great deliberative body. With that, I hand it over to Senator Van Hollen.
Well, thank you, Tim. I do want to begin with the terrible collision that occurred at Reagan National. And our Virginia is really, and Maryland is a partner with Virginia. We've already gotten word that a number of Marylanders have died, along with people from all parts of the country. So our prayers are with everybody who lost loved ones. And I want to thank all the first responders, which included a lot of Marylanders. I talked to the mayor this morning, and we're all in this together. And so I was outraged. I was just watching the president's remarks recently, and it was just grotesque the way he immediately politicized this terrible tragedy. I think he owes the American people an apology. I don't know if anybody witnessed that, but he was immediately pointing fingers, and when he was asked by the press what the basis of his claims were, he admitted that he didn't have any. And it's just part and parcel of what we're witnessing across the board for the last 10 days. And I want to thank Senator Merkley, the ranking member of Budget, for bringing us here today and saying that we're not going to be complicit in a behind-the-scenes vote on a very consequential nominee, Russ Vought, who is unqualified and unfit to head the OMB. In addition to the statements he made about merit-based federal employees, saying he wanted to put them in trauma, he has also made clear that he won't commit to following the law. At the hearing, Senator Murray asked him about compliance with the Impoundment Control Act, which is a way to really enforce our constitutional architecture and separation of powers and Article 1. He refused to comply, so I gave him another chance. In fact, I've got the transcript right here. My question ended, will you comply with the Impoundment Control Act? Question mark. Answer, Senator, the president ran against the Impoundment Control Act. So we went on. I said, well, if you want to propose amendments to the Impoundment Control Act, that's your prerogative. Congress will debate that. But he refused to do it. So make no mistake, what happened Monday night with this across-the-board freeze on really important resources for our local communities, that was not by accident. That was by design. That was done by people in this administration, starting with the president, who don't want to follow the law. And refuse to comply with the Impoundment Control Act, you don't get to cherry pick the law, right? Presidents don't get to say, okay, I'm going to support these programs in this part of the law, but I'm going to oppose those. I'm just going to enforce the parts of the law that help the richest and wealthiest people in the country, but forget about everybody else in the country. You don't get to do that as President of the United States. And this is part of a pattern, and I'll end with this, because Russ Vought was the director of OMB during the first Trump administration. And at that time, you may recall, they withheld military support for Ukraine, funds that have been duly appropriated by the Congress. And so I wrote to the GAO at the time and asked them a simple question. Was Russ Vought and the Trump administration in violation of the Impoundment Control Act? And I got back a letter on January 8th, 2020, and here's the operative line. We conclude that OMB violated the ICA. So here we go again. The same guy who was found to have violated the law in Trump 1 is now being put up to be the head of the same agency, OMB, in round 2. And he is going to violate the law. He all has pretty much admitted it. And the American people and communities around the country are going to suffer because of that. So I'm joining my colleagues today to really warn the country that putting Russ Vought there is not only going to result in violations of the law, but violations of the law that will result in hurting the American people. And I want to introduce Senator Lujan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I want to especially thank Senator Merkley for his leadership here in bringing us together. You've heard it from several of us already. The chaos, the confusion, that's all across America right now because of what happened Monday night. And when the White House thought they were cleaning things up later in the week by rescinding a memo, only to be followed by, well, the executive order is still in place. More confusion, more chaos. I've been on the phone with constituents from every corner of New Mexico, as my colleagues have said over and over, from every corner in America, Democrats and Republicans, farmers, ranchers, opioid treatment, victims of natural disasters that don't know what's happening. Yesterday I had a similar conversation with folks that were here to talk about Head Start, trying to make payroll. Systems that they normally use, those portals to be able to get everything done, weren't accessible. And then later in the day, a switch was flipped on somewhere to say, no, you could do this thing. Everyone tries to crash the system at the same time. What's going to happen? I mean, this is hitting regular people all over America. This is hurting folks. It's just not right. And what concerns me as we go into this, as we've heard already today, is rather than having a conversation with the American people and shedding some light on what happened this week, just to clear things up, rather than having an open conversation like that in a hearing room, they chose to go into a room in the Capitol that's not accessible to any of you. None of the press were invited. The American people were left out of the room. That's only going to create more chaos and more confusion while they're trying to get the person in who, through my line of questioning with this budget hearing, while Mr. Vought time and time again refused to ask questions of my colleagues about Project 2025 or the foundation that he founded as to what it was about or why he was in the hearing room, he owned it when I asked the question, why did you found this group? He said it was to get President Trump ready with the next 4 years and to develop the documents to be able to put these budgets together. Go back and look at the transcript. There should be no confusion about what he is up to and what he is doing. He did it when he was the OMB director before. He's doing it now. And now there's more reporting that while he is not a federal employee, he has not yet been sworn in, has not been confirmed into this important position, that he helped put this thing together. What's going on? There's a lot of alarm here, a lot of questions, a lot of confusion, and it should not have been difficult for our Republican colleagues to work together in a bipartisan fashion to give a few more days for this hearing to take place and be honest with the American people, because that's all people want across the country. They just want to know what's going on. They don't need to be confused. They don't need this chaos. And again, think about all those victims and these natural disasters, people who lost everything. In New Mexico, we had the largest fire in our state's history 3 years ago. Isn't it hard enough on these families dealing with the trauma that they're already going through than to try to figure out if 3 years later they're going to be able to get the funds that they were promised to make themselves as whole as possible? But yet, another sleepless night. This is just not right for the American people. So I pray to God that my Republican colleagues can right this wrong. It just doesn't seem like they're willing to do it. Another colleague that has been working hard to provide support to his families as well, also stricken with a natural disaster in the state of California, Senator Alex Padilla.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. And I want to begin by also expressing my condolences to the victims of the crashes last night, their families. Over the coming days, we'll hear the names and we'll hear the stories of those that have perished. And yes, Senator Lujan, it comes at a time where we're still grappling with the impacts of these unprecedented and devastating fires, plural, in the Los Angeles region. And I think that couldn't underscore the stakes here anymore. In a time of crisis, when people turn to not just local leadership, but to their federal government to be there for them, it is unconscionable that in those moments there's efforts to promote funding freezes, hiring freezes, and in so many ways go back on our fundamental obligations to our constituents and to the American people. The past few days have been anything but business as usual. I agree. This is an attempt at a one-man government shutdown brought to us by President Trump. An effort to block billions of dollars approved by Congress, directed by Congress, funds that would support families recovering from catastrophic wildfires, funds for law enforcement agencies that we rely on to keep our communities safe, funds to support nutrition programs for children and families that depend on us for their next meal. And you see a much longer list and just a very partial list here on the board. But it's because of that real world impact that Americans from throughout the country, they knew immediately what was at stake. And so many of them jumped into action, speaking out, writing our offices, calling our offices to share their concerns, their questions, looking for guidance, looking for help. And it's in that context that our Republican colleagues have the audacity, the nerve, to move forward with President Trump's nominee to lead the very agency responsible for the chaos and the heartache. And not even with the courage to agree to Senator Merkley's request to do this in a committee hearing room where we can have this conversation and vote in public. They're literally in a back room, not accessible, not visible. What are they trying to hide? What are they afraid of? And so, yes, we are here in this room today because this kind of behavior cannot be business as usual. This is not the Senate. The stakes are too high. The impacts too real. Now, as others have said, during his previous tenure at OMB, Russell Vought tried to repeatedly politicize, withhold, and slow the distribution of federal funds, including disaster relief, including foreign aid. Through his conduct, he has demonstrated that he holds himself above the law, above the Constitution, and above the funding decisions made by Congress. Maybe that's why President Trump likes him so much. But for any of my colleagues, not just Democrats, but our colleagues on the other side of the aisle too, who have worked so hard to secure funding for their constituents back home, they too should be concerned. They too should be alarmed. Consider Mr. Vought's work from the first Trump administration, his role in crafting Project 2025, and his arrogance during the confirmation hearing last week. It's clear he is coming after Congress's constitutional authority, and he intends to repeat the events of this week over and over again if he's confirmed. And I'd say it's if because there is still time. To my Republican colleagues, there is still time. You have the power to stop this if you have the courage to do so. Don't give up that power to President Trump. Use that power for your constituents and for our country. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just note that Senator Kaine is pointing out that Trump gutted a key aviation safety committee just before the D.C. plane crash. Just days after his inauguration, he limited membership of a key committee that handles aviation security. This really emphasizes the point that across America, nonpartisan experts are executing policies the benefit of the American people, replacing those professionals with loyal lackeys who have no respect for the law or the Constitution or for the efficient delivery of services is a colossal mistake for everything families depend on. We are so deeply disturbed about Mr. Vought's vision for America. Assault the programs for families, gut them, borrow trillions from the federal government, run up the deficit, and deliver all those benefits to the billionaires. That's the vision. Hurt ordinary families, help the already best off, and increase the debt. It is a devastating vision, and it's completely at odds with how Trump campaigned, said he was for families. So it is a great betrayal. Does anyone have a question? Yes, sir.
Senator Merkley, I saw you ask the acting director of OMB for some information regarding Russell Vought's activities at OMB because of the White House press secretary's comments about it. One, have you gotten a response? And two, can you tell us more broadly about your concerns there?
We have not gotten a response. We have seen reporting that says that he was intimately involved at the request, I believe, of Stephen Miller in preparing for the dark of night destruction of these programs for families, and that it was Vought, that is Mr. Vought, who then assembled in a crisis fashion the assistant directors and the deputy directors to prepare the response. So he is acting, appears to be acting as OMB director without being confirmed. One of the questions we have asked the administration is he on the payroll? Is he a senior advisor? And what role is he doing this? Is it appropriate for him to be serving in a capacity he hasn't yet been confirmed to? We have not received those answers. Anyone else? Yes.
He's definitely on the payroll. The question is of whom?